Yo guys, what is up? Moxsy with IGN, and today we're going over my Warlock leveling guide. Now, Warlock is a subclass or a mastery of the Acolyte class, so if you want to follow this guide, you're going to pick the Acolyte to start, and then once you get through the story or through a certain part of the story, you will unlock your masteries. That's where you're going to pick the Warlock mastery, which allows you to focus on curses, and this leveling build is going to focus on necrotic curse damage, mainly using the skill Chthonic Fissure. This guide will take you from the start of the game all the way through the story and enter endgame, and then I'll have a follow-up endgame guide posted on IGN. Hope you enjoyed the video. Let's get right into it. We're going to talk about skills first, and then we'll get into passives and everything else that you need to know. So to start us off, once you hit level 4, you're going to unlock your very first specialization. This allows you to specialize in a skill and spend points into it. At level 4, you won't have many skills available to you, so you're going to pick Rip Blood as your first specialization, and then put 1 point into Eviscerate. This is going to increase the mana cost of Blood Splatter. However, it's going to make it into an AoE spell, and this will help you kill early trash mobs. As soon as you hit 5 points spent in your skill tree, you unlock Hungering Souls. This is going to be your starting skill. You're going to despecialize Rip Blood. So on any skill, you can go to respec, then despecialize, and then at level 5, you're going to be able to use Hungering Souls. In Hungering Souls, there's a few things that you're going to want to pick up, but you're going to want to head over to the top part to get increased damage to possessed enemies. This is a spell that sends out necrotic skulls that possess them and deal damage over time, and you're going to want to give yourself a chance to poison with these skulls and also fire extra projectiles and increase your damage over time. This top row here is going to be your priority, but it's not going to last very long. At level 8, you unlock Wandering Spirits, where you're going to go to the right side. The right side is your big priority early on, mainly because you get Poisoned Minds, which allows your Wandering Spirits, which are a ton of damage, to deal 36% multiplicative damage to poisoned enemies. That's why we make the skulls have a chance to poison, and we also pick up Spectral Putrescence. This allows our spirits that we're going to be summoning constantly to have a 30% chance to cast a poison spell that has a 100% chance to poison. So early on with our Wandering Spirits and our Hungering Souls, you're going to have a lot of poison damage and a lot of necrotic damage going on, and this will last you till around level 15. While you are leveling, you're going to want to put points to start into Forbidden Knowledge to give you +8 intelligence and necrotic resistance. You're going to want to spend some points into Blood Aura. This is going to increase your damage, and we're also going to grab the Mania or Mortality for ward gained on death, and 5 points into Unnatural Preservation for ward retention, necrotic resistance, and poison resistance. All of this necrotic resistance, the 60% here, is going to be very, very important. We'll talk about that later once we unlock our Warlock Mastery. You're going to be progressing up until around level 15, where you're most likely unlock your Warlock Mastery. To unlock it, you just need to progress to a point in the story. You can't miss it. You can't progress the story unless you unlock it. And then once we get to Warlock Mastery, we got some interesting things to talk about. Once you're around level 20, there's a few things that we get to do. At around level 20, you should unlock your Warlock specialization, and that will immediately unlock Chthonic Fissure. This is going to be your main skill, and you unlock your third specialization slot at level 20, so go ahead and specialize in Chthonic Fissure. We're also going to unspecialize out of Hungering Souls and specialize in Spirit Plague. Remember that this is going to be a curse necrotic damage over time, and Spirit Plague is a curse skill, and Hungering Souls is not a curse skill, and this just works better with what we're about to set up. Spirit Plague, once you unlock it and specialize in it, you're really going to want to put points into Pestilence. This is going to, every time that you cast it, increase your global damage over time, which is fantastic. And we can grab Plague, which is an ailment that guarantees poison damage on enemies. We're also going to want to grab Rotten to the Core, which is going to give us more damage with our Spirit Plague Curse, and Concentrated Rot, which gives us more damage as well. You can also grab Toxic Transmission for extra stacks and increased cast speed and duration for the skill, so that the faster you cast it, the more stacks of Pestilence you can build up. When you're starting out with this skill, this section right here is your big priority focus on getting these branches leveled and then work your way down here. And then Chthonic Fissure. Now, Chthonic Fissure is a skill that has kind of a two-part attack. So the first part of it drops a fissure on the ground that does fire damage over time to enemies on top of it, and then it also releases spirits from the fissure that seek out nearby enemies. These spirits inflict enemies with Torment, which is a curse that slows and deals necrotic damage over time. Now, unlike a lot of other ailments in this game, Torment cannot stack. So if you're you can stack poison on enemies and get tons of stack of poison. You can stack a bleed on enemies and get tons of stacks of bleed. You cannot stack Torment. Once it hits an enemy, it'll just deal its damage. It'll apply to them, and you can't get multiple stacks of Torment, which sounds not great, right? However, we can scale Torment to ridiculous amounts of damage, and that's what this build is going to focus on. Torment is a curse, and once you unlock Chthonic Fissure, you're going to make your way down to this bottom branch. Now, this bottom branch is the most important part of Chthonic Fissure. We're going to unlock the ability to get our spirits to apply Damned. This is another damage over time that does necrotic damage, and this Damned stacks, so we get 3 stacks of dot whenever our spirits hit an enemy. And then we're also going to want to grab Twisted Waves. Torment deals more damage multiplicative with other modifiers per 2% uncapped necrotic resistance. Now, this is so fantastic because just with our previous skill tree, we've already got 60% necrotic resistance, and by picking the Warlock class, you already get a ton of necrotic resistance inherently. So just picking this up when you're starting out at level 20, you probably already have over 100 necrotic resistance. If you don't, make sure that you're looking out for pieces of gear that drop with necrotic resistance, because that's what's going to scale Torment up so much. We can also grab Grim Tide, that you get 1% added necrotic damage, or necrotic damage per 1% added crit multi, which will work in later. But this is kind of the core of Chthonic Fissure. You're also gonna grab Tome Gorger. This is pretty important. Torment deals more damage multiplicative with other modifiers to ignited, poisoned, or bleeding enemies. And remember that our Spirit Plague is gonna poison enemies, and our Wandering Spirits are gonna be casting Spectral Putrescence, which has a 100% chance to poison enemies. So now we've got tons of poison and tons of necrotic damage. For the Warlock skill tree, your first 5 points should go into Soul Stealer. This is going to give you mana regen, but more importantly, you gain a chance per curse on enemies to gain mana on hit. This is going to give you lots of mana sustain, helps the build feel really nice early on, so that you're not struggling with mana as much. So make sure you put 5 points in this to get its 5-point bonus. Next up, you're going to want to put your points into Occultist Mind. This is going to give you +5 intelligence. Intelligence is what's going to be scaling a lot of our damage, but it's also going to give us the 5-point bonus that we gain additional mana per point of intelligence. This is fantastic because you're going to be using a lot of skills and it'll cost a lot of mana, so now you're just going to get tons of extra mana. And then we're going to be grabbing our first big damage option in Unholy Torment. This is going to give flat spell damage for curses and increased area for curses, 2 fantastic things for us. And flat spell damage for curses is going to be one of the biggest ways to scale up our damage. Flat damage is so good in this game because it applies before all of your percentage increases and your multipliers, so giving you a better base to work with after all of your damage increases happen is going to scale up your damage dramatically. Next up in the passive tree, we're going to grab some survivability with Spirit Leech. This is going to give us health leech and even more leech against cursed targets. This is a ton of survivability. We're also going to put 3 points into Ward of Malevolence. This is going to give us ward on kill and ward gained per second while channeling. And also we're going to do this so that we can get the 3-point bonus in Imperishable. This is going to give us a Ward Decay threshold per 1% necrotic resistance. Ward Decay threshold prevents your ward from decaying past a certain point, so all of the extra ward that we've been getting and picking up and the ward gained on kill will allow you to constantly be getting ward, which adds even more survivability to the build. Then you're going to want to focus, once you've spent these points, on grabbing Wither. Wither is a massive damage increase for the build. Each stack of Wither increases damage taken from curses by 10%, which lasts 3 seconds, and it can stack up to 20 times. If you can get 20 stacks of this, you're going to be doing 200% increased damage with all of your curses, and when you get the 5-point bonus, you're going to take less damage from withered enemies. Less damage taken is really, really helpful, and you can also grab 1 point into harrowing. I've got 5 here at the moment, but when you get 5 in here, you're going to get more armor per curse on targets, and dark protections 5-point bonus is going to give you less damage taken per curse on target, and this spending all of these points should get you over to Profane Veil at level 35, which is unlocking our next specialization. Now, we want to be cursing targets a lot with this build. We've got Chthonic Fissure, which is going to be Prying Torment. That's a curse. We've got Spirit Plague. That's going to be a curse. And then Profane Veil applies a ton of curses for us. So you're going to want to do a few things with Profane Veil. First, you're going to want to grab Penitent Target. This is just 2 points to get here to apply more curses to our enemies. And then you can work your way over here to apply Bone Curse to enemies whenever you enter Profane Veil. Profane Veil is a channeled movement skill that basically allows you to not take damage while you're in it. It's super nice, and it's going to be like a real staple part of this build. It's going to be constantly applying multiple curses on enemies, which is really important for us. And when we come down here, we're going to grab Seance. When a wandering spirit is revealed inside Profane's Veil area, the spirit deals more damage, multiplicative with other modifiers, in a larger area for the rest of the spirit's duration. Additionally, for each spirit revealed inside Profane's Veil area, you gain ward per uncapped necrotic resistance. So this is going to give us a ton of ward while we're in Profane Veil, but it's also going to give our Wandering Spirits, which we're already doing a ton of damage, 75% more damage and 75% increased area. What we're going to do with this, actually, once you grab it, you're going to want to make sure that you work your way down into this bottom part of Wandering Spirits, pick up Reap the Damned. This is going to give you 60% multiplicative increased damage to cursed enemies, which whenever you Profane Veil, you're going to make sure that they're cursed anyways, and 60% increased damage to damned enemies. Remember that our Chthonic Fissure is going to be damning things. This is 120% multiplicative increased damage, and we're also going to grab Familiar Souls. This is going to give it 15% increased damage, but 45% less reveal range. The reason the reveal range is nice is when they're actually more concentrated, they're going to hit the same enemy multiple times, and this is actually going to pump up the Wandering Spirit's damage for bossing, which is really, really nice. So that's a really strong synergy that you're going to be able to pick up around level 35-ish, and then we'll talk about the rest of Profane Veil here in a second. After you pick up the Wither passive, you're going to want to make sure that you get Fleeting Crown. This is going to give you a chance to get haste whenever you kill an enemy. Haste is going to give you 30% increased movement speed, and with this node, you're going to get increased haste effect, so you're going to get, of that 30%, you're going to get 15% more, so anytime that you kill an enemy, you have a 25% chance to get 45% movement speed, which will just make you feel so speedy. And then your last big priorities in the skill tree before you start rounding things out are to grab Encroaching Darkness. This is mainly to give you an extra curse that you can cast on enemies, and more importantly, get down to Dustbringer, which is going to give us even more flat damage for our curses. And whenever you hit a boss, you're also going to trigger a curse on them. All of these things are fantastic, and then we can get into our final points of our skills. So once you hit level 50, I believe it is, which is kind of where we're going to end with this leveling guide, you're going to unlock your last specialization, which we're going to put points into Transplant, or specialize in Transplant. Transplant is a movement skill. You should be using this while you're leveling. I always have it on, even if I'm not spec'd into it. But when we specialize into this, we're going to get some really cool things. Mainly, we're going to come up here, focus on here, and grab Bone Armor. This, whenever we cast Transplant, we're going to take 12% less damage. We're going to give ourselves armor, and we can make that bone armor more effective, increase its duration, and make sure that we get the littlest cooldown for Transplant. If you can find cooldown on your boots, you can have 100% uptime of Transplant, which will give you 100% uptime of the of your movement, your less damage taken, and you can also pick up Acolyte's Fever, which will guarantee you that you're constantly getting haste for that 45% increased movement speed, and Frenzy for 20% cast speed. In addition, we're going to come over here, grab Doombringer, so that we're applying more bone curses on our enemies, and Violent Emergence gives us a kill threshold, so that if you're fighting a boss and you see its health bar go down to 15%, you can just dash into them and instantly kill them. This is really, really nice for finishing off bosses, because they do get the endurance threshold, which will make them harder to kill once they're at low health. And to round out the rest of our abilities, you're going to make sure that you want to pick up Terrifying Presence for your Wandering Spirits. This is going to make sure that enemies are feared whenever they get touched by a spirit. Feared enemies will turn around and run away. In the time that they're running away, your dot damage will most likely kill them. This will mean that while you're running through packs of enemies, a lot of the times they're just not going to be fighting back, which is a huge survivability tool. And if you get any extra points, you can make sure that they're shredding enemy necrotic resistance. With your Chthonic Fissure, you're going to want to make sure that you're shredding more of that necrotic resistance, and then you can work your way, if you got extra points, into Eradication to give it 24% more damage to rares and bosses, 48% if they're cursed, which they always will be, and we can also make Chthonic Fissure apply Forbidden Chasm, which is another curse on hit. With Spirit Plague, you're going to want to make sure that you pick up Plague of Eyes. This is going to allow you to deal additional spell necrotic damage for each point of intelligence. This is just flat damage for it. And make sure that you're casting your Spirit Plagues as fast as you possibly can. 60% increased cast speed for this is fantastic. And we put 1 point here so that whenever you hit an enemy that's afflicted by this, you have a chance to spread. In Profane Veil, you're going to come and pick up the most important 2 points here, which is Scorn. You deal more global damage to cursed enemies while in Profane Veil. This is going to give you 50% multiplicative increased damage to enemies that are cursed, which is basically everything, and you can put 2 points into Stream of Profanity, so that whenever you use a curse, you're going to get cooldown. What this allows you to do is stay in Profane Veil, where you basically can't be killed all the time, deal more damage while you're in Profane Veil, and then when you come out of it, anytime you cast a curse, aka Spirit Plague, you're going to constantly be getting cooldown for Profane Veil, and with that, you're going to round it up by grabbing Eternal Blasphemy, which is going to give you more duration and more movement speed while in Veil, which is just fantastic. And then lastly, with our Transplant, I kind of already covered this, but make sure that you get this kill threshold. It'll help a ton for bossing, and the cast speed and cooldown, so that you can keep teleporting around. To round out the build, you can put some extra points into Intelligence and Vitality, and also grab some points into Chaotic Strikes. Mainly just put 2 points here so that you can get 40% crit multiplier with Wreak Havoc, which once again, in Chthonic Fissure, anytime that you pick up crit multiplier, it's actually going to give you 1% increased necrotic damage. So that node is 40% increased necrotic damage. To help you out with gearing, we're going to set up a quick loot filter. If you hit Shift and F, it'll open up your loot filters. We're going to make a prioritization loot filter of just highlighting some important things. So we can go to Recolor, Select Color. We're going to make it green. And then we're going to emphasize the loot, and then we're going to make this for affixes that are damage affixes, the things that we're looking for that's going to increase our damage. So the first one is damage over time, is going to be really nice for us. Then we're going to look for necrotic. Then with this, we're going to grab necrotic damage, necrotic penetration, and also the shared increased necrotic damage is pretty nice. Then we're going to look for spell damage. Spell damage is fine, but we're really looking for the spell damage for curses. That is fantastic for us. And that is going to be a very basic looking for damage affixes. And if we go to advanced options, we can make it so that the total affix tiers are more or equal to 2 tiers. Basically, that we're not looking for any tier 1s. This is just going to mean that they need to be tier 2 tiers. So there we add that. Then for our defenses, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to go here, look for things with necrotic resistance. This is really, really important for us. We're also going to grab the health ones. These are going to be increased health and hybrid health. We don't care about added health. We're also going to look for things that have cooldown on them, increase cooldown recovery speed, and lastly, look for things that have some movement. All of these are going to be pretty nice for our build. Let's make them recolor with red. Sure, why not? Emphasize them. And then advanced total affix tiers of more or equal to than 2 tiers together, so that we're not just looking for the bare minimum. And obviously, if you're harder into the end game, you can look for like tier 4 affixes, but just for now, we'll make it for tier 2 because this is a leveling guide. And that's just a simple way to set up to look for things that are going to be good for this build. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. There will be an endgame guide for this build if you want to follow it from 1 to 50. The endgame version, which is going to be even more in-depth, will be posted shortly. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Stay tuned for that one. And for all other things Last Epoch, stay tuned here at IGN.